Good morning, Kalimera. Since I see a few kids in church this morning, I'm gonna ask you some questions as part of my sermon. So if you know the answer to my question, just raise your hand, and when I call on you, just yell it out, because you are far away, some of you. So my first question is, name a rule that your parents have at home. Name a rule that your parents have at home. A rule that your parents have at home. Yes, what is a rule your parents have at home? You gotta yell though. Keep the house clean. That's a good rule. That's a great rule. If we don't have that rule, we have big problems. What happens when the house isn't clean? It looks like a mess. Okay, it looks bad. What else happens when the house isn't clean? You might have unwanted guests, like if you get food all over the floor at a meal and then you don't clean that up, you might have like unwanted guests, like roaches and things. And if you leave the food long enough, it might get moldy and then you might get sick. So it's not clean, you get unwanted guests and you might get sick. So that's a really good rule. Okay, what's another rule you have at home? Clean up after yourself. Why is that important? Scream, I can't hear it. If you leave a big mess, you don't clean everything up, then it becomes somebody else's job. And everybody has jobs. Your parents have jobs, they have to work, they have to cook, and it takes away their time from you. So, somebody else. Anybody back there? Some rule you have in your house. Yeah, scream it out. Be kind to your siblings. That's very important. And what happens, and why should you do that? What happens when you're not kind to your siblings? And fights happen, you get in trouble, maybe you break things, maybe you get stressed out, I don't know. All right, anybody else have a rule? Anybody else have any rules? All right, so Jesus in the gospel lesson today talks about a couple rules. Now, the reason why we have rules is because if you didn't have rules, you'd have chaos. All right, so imagine if your parents said, we're not having any rules in the house, do anything that you want. You would probably have a messy house, you would probably get in fights all the time, and the house, you would not be responsible, you wouldn't learn responsibility. You'd have just chaos in your house. So Jesus tells us some rules today. And these rules, they sound kind of harsh because he's making a point, right? So he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. That seems kind of harsh. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't love your mother or your father. It doesn't mean you shouldn't love your son or daughter. It shouldn't mean that you shouldn't love your sister and brother. What it means is we love God first. We put God first before everybody. And when we put God first before everybody else, we end up being kind to everybody else. Because God tells us, love everybody. So if we put God first above everything, then I'm always going to love my father or mother. I'm always going to love my brother or sister. I'm always going to love my son or daughter. I'm always going to want to keep the house clean. Because God tells us to love him, put him first, and to serve other people. So when we keep that in mind, everything else kind of falls into place. But when we lose sight of that, and we put something else first, like we say, I'm going to put baseball first, or I'm going to put even something noble like homework first. I'm going to put homework first. What's wrong with putting homework first? Like, homework is pretty high on the list. Homework should be pretty high on the list. You want to be good students. But what's the problem with putting homework first? The problem with that is, let's say that you're sitting at your kitchen table and you're doing your homework like a good student, and somebody says, help, I'm hurting, I need some help. God says you have to go serve that person first. You don't just say, well, I'm doing my homework. I can't be concerned about anybody or anything else. Like, there are times when you sit down to do your homework that you shouldn't be concerned about anything else. You shouldn't be like checking your phone or watching TV. You should focus on your homework. But when there's a call to do something, there's a call to help somebody, then that goes above everything. Can you imagine if your father or mother fell down off a ladder and they said, help me, I'm hurt. And you say, no, mommy, I'm doing my math homework. I can't help you now. Okay? That would be breaking God's rule. Right? God's rule says you put God first and you help people. And when you do that, everything else kind of falls in line. Everything else kind of falls in line behind that. And Jesus tells us you don't have to do big things. He says even if you give a cup of cold water to somebody, you're gonna please God. So many people think like I have to do some magnificent, huge thing in order to serve God, in order to please God. Even the little things please God. A please and a thank you and a small gesture like cleaning up your room or clearing off the table. Those are good things. Those are small things. God doesn't say in this chapter here, we got to move mountains. He says, let's do little things. Put me first, and you put me first by doing the little things, the average things, the daily things. So that's the lesson of the gospel today. Please stand.